Emily, and I am here to inspire and empower you to become the best version of yourself. And in today's video, we're going to be talking all about culture shock, leaving the Amish culture, and kind of what that process was like. I've gotten a lot of questions about what was the culture shock like, what shocked you the most, all these different questions. So I have a list of questions I'm going to be answering specifically around culture shock. And I talk a lot more about my story in my book, From Choice to Change, which you can get off of Amazon. But before I get into it, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button so that way you get notified each week when I upload a new video. So going into what was the culture shock like leaving the Amish culture, and what were you not expecting? Those are the most common question I get asked. And I would say the culture shock was not something I had thought about. Like, I didn't think, I'm going to leave the Amish culture and I'm going to go through this culture shock of like, what in the world is going on, right? It wasn't something I had planned. Of course, I'm 17. So, you don't think about those things when you're 17. And I would say the very thing that really comes to my mind is I was very, very vulnerable. And vulnerable from a standpoint of I didn't know a lot of things and I felt so undereducated, which worked to my advantage when I went to go get my degree. It really drove me to get a degree and to really better my life because I wanted to educate myself. And I personally love learning. Even now, just, with my clients, with business consulting, like I love learning anything business related because it lights me up and then I can transfer my knowledge and help other people, right? So I would say the biggest thing was I felt like really undereducated, and I didn't realize that would also take a hit to my confidence level because I never struggled in school. I was very, very smart for, Amish school standards, which they only go to the 8th grade, which is equivalent to like 6th grade elementary level. So that was one of the very things was the not knowing things that people my age already knew, and the undereducation. The other thing for the culture shock, what I've noticed, and it's been a pattern that I have actually carried on, I've just recently was aware that I picked up this pattern, was I tried to fly under the radar, and not be noticed. I thought if wherever I went, I would stand out as like the ex-Amish and everybody would be able to pick it up. And for the longest time, because I felt like people could pick this up on me and I wasn't educated and I couldn't speak the way I wanted to because I didn't have the knowledge to, I would just fly under the radar. I would just, do whatever, not make a big scene, not ever try to be in the spotlight, which is interesting now that I shoot YouTube videos, right? And I love to speak, public speaking and stuff. But I would just try to fly under the radar just to keep a low profile, right? And I noticed when I reflect back on my life, I started that when I left the Amish culture. Like, I just didn't want to, I was tired of having, the attention that I got as I was leaving the culture was not in a positive way. It was a negative way, right? It was, telling me like how horrible a person I am and all these things that are going to happen as I leave the Amish culture. So then from then on, I picked up this story that I needed to fly under the radar because that was safe for me. So it's interesting because that was one of the things that I realized I picked up through the culture shock, was just trying to fly under the radar. The other thing that was really challenging going through the culture shock it was so lonely. It was so lonely, and there were times, I would cry because like I felt like I had no one. Like I had left, everything behind. I had very few people that I knew or even associated with, and the loneliness was heavy, and I struggled with that a lot. Just being lonely, there wasn't a whole lot of community, there wasn't a whole lot of, I didn't know where I fit in. And for years, I would say just maybe in the last year and a half, 2 years, I really had to figure out like, where do I fit in? And I learned it's not about fitting in, right? It's about just creating a space for yourself, and whoever you attract into your life, you're going to attract into your life, and that's your community. Now, I have been part of some amazing communities entrepreneurs, business owners, and then also like in the spiritual communities, just having that support and community is very important. And the Amish community is very, very close. But I will say within that Amish community too, they also have the division just like any other communities do. So that was another thing that I realized, when I left the culture, there was churches that kind of had that community out, that were not Amish, but it was kind of hard to figure out like, where do I now fit in? It was challenging. And at 17, you're just like, where do I go? What do I do? Right? The other thing I would say was challenging was overwhelming by all the decisions I needed to make. I was 17. Mind you, in the Amish culture, the women, and they don't make a whole lot of decisions. And I definitely didn't make any decisions at 17 growing up. Like, I was just told, like, this is what you do, and that's what I did. Like, I was obedient and I did those things. Well, I was obedient until, I decided to leave the culture. But the thing about it was all these decisions I felt like I needed to make, and I struggled with it because I held myself to such a high standard that I needed to be perfect. I needed to do these things. I needed to make sure that I didn't fail. And I still find myself in that perfectionist mindset, right? Where I'll be like, oh, this is not perfect, so I'm not going to do it. And the decisions, the overwhelming of like, now I need to make this decision and now I need to make that decision. And it was just so overwhelming because I didn't know who to go for advice. How do I make the right decision, And even as a mom, I felt like it even got worse because now I had children. And now I was not even just impacting my life, I was impacting my children's life. And so when I went through my divorce, making those decisions and then being fully responsible for this decision, it was really, really overwhelming. And I would say it's something that I have learned, that I've really had to tap into myself of how to make a decision versus, when you're in your head versus when you're in your heart. And that was a game changer for me, was to figure out, am I making this decision based off of an ego or a scarcity mindset, or am I making the decision based off of something I feel in my heart and I'm coming from an abundance place? I didn't learn that right at 17 when I left culture, but I've learned that now, which was totally game changer for me. I would say the other thing with going through culture shock, I was afraid, I really was afraid that I had no safety nets. I had walked away from my family, and it was like I was automatically gone into a survival mode. So I was staying in survival mode because I was like, I have to make it, because if I fail, there's no going back, there's no doing this. And it was this fear. And keep in mind, this fear was instilled into me as soon as I knew that, she's thinking about leaving the culture. So those fear tactics start, and they start getting instilled. And so I went into this survival mode, and then 2 decades later, I have to unlearn the survival mode. And I went into survival mode so much that I didn't realize I was in survival mode for so many years, until I went through therapy and I did a lot of coaching, and I learned a lot of like how I was programmed, why I was always surviving, nothing was ever good enough for me. Like, I could get the next promotion and I was on to the next one. I could get this status, and I was on to the next one. And it's just because I was in that survival mechanism, because of the fact that it went back to, I felt like I had no safety net. And it was just like, you have to survive, you don't have a choice. And those were some of the biggest things with as going through the culture shock I've learned that have really shaped me. And some not so positive. I've had to relearn a lot. I felt like I learned a lot growing up. My parents did teach me a lot, and then when I left the culture, it was like a whole other life. Like at 17, just like I threw myself out there, and then I had to learn again. So there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of lessons. I was also very, very shocked around language, like the way people talk, right? I was like, wait, people really talk like that? Because that was something that was very sheltered within the Amish community. They don't cuss a whole lot. But, if you watch some of my videos and if you followed me on social media, on Instagram, I dropped the F-bombs. So now I've kind of went the other direction, right? But the way people talk, and then the other thing was like just the difference in the mentality. There was there were so many different people with so many different backgrounds. I wasn't used to that. And as most of you know, I've transitioned from living in the Midwest to living in Florida, which Florida is amazing. And the Midwest there wasn't a whole lot of culture and diversity in the Midwest for me or my boys. And as we moved to Florida, I'm now just learning another level, right? Coming from the Amish culture where they have like no diversity, they have one culture, everyone's the same. And then going to the Midwest, it's, when I left culture, there was a little bit. And then coming to Florida where there's a lot, like it's globally, has been an incredible thing to learn. But going through the culture shock, it was like, what is happening? What is going on? And there were times like I questioned whether I made the right decision. And that's the other thing I get asked a lot. Do you feel like you made the right decision? And if I was to go back and redo it, yeah. Would there be steps that I would redo? Yes. But I would definitely still leave the culture because I knew within myself that I wasn't meant to be there. I knew that that culture was not going to be my life. And I made that choice. It was a challenging choice. And I know if you've watched part 1, 2, and 3 of my story, you'll hear, it wasn't an overnight decision. But it shaped me into who I am today. And I would not go back and say I would go back to the culture, even if I had that choice. And I do talk about it a lot in my book of like, just the different things that it shaped me. So this was about culture shock. I'll be doing another video. I've gotten a lot of questions, just different myths about Amish culture, like technology, sex, food, all these things. So I'm going to be doing them separately. So this will just be kind of like my very first one around the culture shock, and then I'll continue to upload each week until I've answered all the questions that I have had people comment on my YouTube channel and within my YouTube community as well. So if you have specific questions and you want them answered, you can comment below, or you can also post it in my YouTube community or send me an email. And I'm always down to answer any questions. I'm a pretty open book. I don't hide anything. I'll share whatever you want to know. But anyways, so thank you for watching, and until next time, go out and inspire someone to become a better version of themselves.